Hey, let's get started. Welcome everyone to another GlassNet virtual workshop. I'd like to just say a few words about GlassNet before turning it over to the chair people for the session. GlassNet is a network of networks. You're going to learn about networks. You've got the expert on that, Marisa, here today. So this is an NSF activity. It's part of ExcelNet. You'll hear more about ExcelNet from Marisa. But GlassNet's focused on addressing the world's land and water sustainability challenges using a global to global approach. And you'll get more of a feel about that, no doubt, in the presentations today. Importantly, we offer support for early career scholar exchanges. So several of the people today, you'll be hearing from today, were sponsored by GlassNet to travel internationally and across disciplines and to enhance their experience in that. If you want to learn more about the science of GlassNet, take a look at the special issue of Environmental Research Letters that was published last year based on a GlassNet conference and follow-ups. And if you want to learn more about databases and tools that are available for doing this kind of global analysis, visit my GeoHub. You can find that at glassnet.net. So glassnet.net. So without further ado, I want to introduce the organizers and chairs of today's workshop, Carly Jordan Frank. Carly is a PhD student in climate science at Purdue, and Elizabeth Libby Kula, a PhD student in applied economics at the University of Minnesota. So over to you, Carly.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction. And both Libby and I have been sponsored to travel internationally, and I'm sure either one of us would be happy to talk about that experience if anyone has any questions. But thank you for attending this workshop. As Tom mentioned, it is part of a series of workshops kind of put together based on what we deem to be what PhD students were interested in and kind of missing. This one will center on what is a network of networks, how it can be used to your advantage, and what experiences people have had. So I don't want to take up too much time, and I will be introducing our first speaker, who will be one of 3 speakers, followed by a collective question and answer session. If you do have a question anytime, please pop it in the chat or raise your hand at the end and voice that question aloud. So our first speaker will be Marisa Rinkus, who is the Associate Director of the Toolbox Dialogue Initiative Center at Michigan State University. And I won't read her full bio for the essence of time, but Marisa, all yours. Thank you.
You're muted.
Talking to myself, that's what I'm doing. I'm really excited to be here. I'm tell you a little bit about what we do and get my shared screen up here. As Carly mentioned, I'm Associate Director of the Toolbox Dialogue Initiative Center at Michigan State University, and we're working with the National Science Foundation ExcelNet program, so accelerating international network-to-network collaboration. Screen up. And I'll just start a little bit by talking about what networks and networks of networks are according to the ExcelNet program and the National Science Foundation. And I want to talk a little bit about the work that we do with all of the network of network programs, the ExcelNet programs through NSF, and some of the research and data that we recently collected in doing it, several interviews and our workshops as well. So networks, the National Science Foundation defines networks as established, coordinated, distributed groups of scientific researchers from multiple institutions who collaborate within or across fields to collect and share resources, knowledge, and expertise to address community-identified questions or needs. That seems big enough as it is, right? Then we have networks of networks, so a link among networks that goes beyond existing or emerging concentrations of expertise, amplifies and leverages connections across linked networks, and strengthens these community linkages across boundaries. And I'll talk a little bit about this in a minute, but I see this also, these networks of networks, as a community of practice. So the ExcelNet program goal is to accelerate scientific discovery and foster these high-impact STEM through strategically linked multi-team international collaborations that leverage internationally distributed resources. And ExcelNet is unique in the funding mechanisms for NSF because ExcelNet works to really fund this process of building an international network of networks, not necessarily directly the research that it conducts. And that's where my work with the Toolbox Dialogue Initiative comes in. So the Toolbox Dialogue Initiative Center is a consulting and research group. Again, we're based at Michigan State University. We facilitate collaborative capacity building through our dialogue-based workshops with many partners around the world and other NSF programs as well. We also collect data from our workshops and also data from interviews and surveys, and understanding the practice of collaborative research with an emphasis on cross-disciplinarity and knowledge production. So our workshops help feed into our research, and our research also helps to feed into our facilitation and capacity building work. So as I mentioned, we can also think of networks of networks and the community of ExcelNet networks of networks as a community of practice. So community of practice are communities formed by people who engage in a process of collective learning in a shared domain. So for a network of networks, we think about the domain as accelerating scientific discovery. The community, of course, is researchers from all career stages, from local communities, from industry, from government, from NGOs, any of the collaborators and partners that you work with across your network of networks. And then the practice, of course, being workshops, fellowships, the research papers that are written, the working groups, the data sharing, conferences, virtual networking, and all of those activities. For our ExcelNet awardees, we also work to build a network of networks that helps to really share knowledge and resources around building international networks of networks, around international collaboration, and that process of building and sustaining these networks of networks. So the community involves all of our ExcelNet program awardees, project members, and the networks themselves. And our practice involves the workshops that we host, the meetings, webinars, any virtual networking communication platforms, research sharing, and knowledge exchange. So our work with NSF has come under a few awards. We just recently have a new award that's Building Capacity, Community, and Knowledge for International Network-to-Network Collaboration. And we aim to contribute to the ExcelNet program by facilitating capacity building workshops for the project team. So the dialogue-based toolbox workshops, that is the foundation of the work that we do, and I can answer more questions about that later. Organizing and facilitating the awardee meetings, or what we call our annual meeting, and more recently, a professional development workshop for ECRs, which we held in our first year last year, and now have been able to secure funding to have that workshop for the next 3 years, including this October. Supporting and growing our ExcelNet community of practice, so providing the virtual and in-person space for sharing of knowledge and resources, and helping to facilitate that. So people have questions and I can connect. I can also be a facilitator in connecting people to find those knowledge or resources they're looking for. And then conducting research to help us better understand networks of networks. So networks of networks are a slightly, in the ExcelNet way, a slightly newer practice, and there's not as much information and understanding how they function and how we can help improve them. So what are the best practices and how can we address challenges? So through our work with the ExcelNet programs, we have conducted many workshops, so 46 workshops with ExcelNet teams with over 300 participants. We've had 5 annual meetings, both in person and virtual, including the first professional development workshop for ECRs last year. And our community of practice that has included 8 roundtable discussions, webinars, and a Slack channel, which is actually over 451 people at the moment as we add in the new cohort of awardees every year. So what have we learned from the dialogue that we have with ExcelNet teams? So these networks of networks have a lot of shared goals, right? The shared goal of sustainability. How are we going to sustain our network over time? Building a pipeline, a career pipeline for early career researchers, developing a shared vision, and creating an attractive value proposition. How do you encourage engagement and sustain that engagement of partners across the world? Of course, the shared challenge is motivating that participant when there aren't particular financial incentives to be involved at all times. Sustaining that engagement over time, we know we're all busy and can get overloaded. So how do we continue to keep people excited and engaged? Coordinating the network of networks, the sheer project management and coordination of all of the moving parts. And then the uncertainty of how do we know that we're successful as time moves on? What are the short-term and long-term measures of success? So our study really aimed to really look at this process of building and sustaining international networks of networks and the different structures that the teams are using, and then identifying these best practices as well as challenges for international network-to-network collaboration. So we conducted 30 interviews with 20 teams. These years here are when the teams were funded. So most of the teams were funded in 2019 or 2020. So their networks of networks have been going on for a few years. So we tried to get a variety to understand maybe the different challenges and successes that people are having over time. And what have we learned? I want to focus more on, what is really important here for ECRs. So we learned that defining success is really in these three areas: engagement, advancing science, and what I'm calling recognition, or we can think of as establishing your brand. So the first one in engagement, the ECRs or early career researchers are really seen as both connectors and beneficiaries of this engagement. And that leads in really to the advancing science aspect too as well. So having access to researchers and institutions around the world, ECRs are often the ones who are bridging or making connections for the international networks of networks. So they're playing a major role in here and contributing to the networks of networks in that way. And they're also benefiting because they're having access to researchers and institutions that they may not have had otherwise. They're also able to be at the front end of some of these newer discussions, these scientific discussions about the area or field that they're in, and really being able to create collaborations, probably in international collaborations, probably earlier than maybe their peers are. And so this is something that I'm really interested into looking more into. Finally, if we're looking at recognition, this is having a positive association with the network of networks. So one way to define success and design for success is to really have a positive association with what the larger network of network is doing. And so is there that brand recognition? Do people understand, for instance, what GLASSNET is, or they've heard about it? Oh yeah, I've heard about that. They're doing interesting things, right? People are aware that they've had these scientific products and developments. And it also helps to increase the credibility and trust and engagement in the community. And I see that as a benefit for the early career researchers, because saying that you're associated with something that is well known across the globe, right, can be helpful for your career and your networking as well. Thinking about engagement, successful engagement and network activities require these aspects from what we've heard from the PIs who are involved in this. So shared values. This was really described to us as doing science together is better than doing it apart. So putting together a group and a network of networks that has that shares this value of collaboration. Also, who participates matters. So ensuring diversity and inclusion across the network of networks, not just in individuals, but also in networks and their size and function, and recognizing the different aspects of power and privilege around the world. Focusing on early career researchers and creating spaces for career development. So the scientific aspect is an important part of it, and making those collaborations for research, but also creating these spaces for career development, giving opportunities for leadership, etc. And then flexibility. So learning to maximize the virtual as well as the in-person spaces, as most of these teams started in 2019, just before the pandemic. So a lot of teams have been navigating that space over time. Just looking at what is considered these contributions to science, there are 5 main contributions that people have identified. So discovering gaps or new areas in a field, proposing new ideas for understanding a problem, building infrastructure solutions, emergent areas for knowledge, and outlining collective research agendas. I think these are all very excellent places where ECRs can benefit from being part of these networks of networks, and thinking about what contributions to science that you want to be part of, and how does what you're doing fit into these areas. So I had these slides labeled as challenges. I'm rebranding them as opportunities for learning. So an opportunity for learning about attracting and sustaining engagement. A lot of the networks of networks are really focused on addressing these by purposely spending time on building relationships and clearly communicating. And I put these in here because I think these are important aspects of what we call it in the science of team science. So in building your capacity as early career researchers, one of the things of understanding is the importance of building relationships in your collaborations, and also having clear communication. So these are really important skills, I think, that can be learned as you're participating in these networks that and becoming a leader yourself. So when you're then doing some of these larger projects on your own, you're able to replicate some of what you're learning. Also, working with a diversity of institutions, scientific fields, the geographical boundaries, and then also cultural norms, right, can be a challenge. But there are also opportunities for learning about creating a shared culture, which can be guided by either formalized norms, codes of conduct, authorship agreements, diversity statements, bylaws. These are all really important things to learn if you're interested in being parts of large collaborations. And then learning how to model the behaviors through your working groups and through your core team. So how do you model a shared culture of open communication and collaboration throughout? So that's a really important thing, I think, for leadership development. And then other areas, opportunities for learning, are project management. So there's definitely a need for more training in communication and project management skills to successfully manage these large networks and collaboration. So I would encourage folks to really look into opportunities for gaining more project management skills, whether it's formal training. I think Google has an online training to understand what are some skills that you can pick up, and then working to apply those in your network of networks and the working groups and other things that you're working on, because that is a really important skill as you continue in your career. And it's something that even PIs and co-PIs we talked to that are well established in their career felt slightly unprepared for. So this is a great opportunity to do that. And I will stop there. I will end the show, but I'm happy to take any questions about anything or talk more.
Thank you. I think Libby will introduce our next speaker.
Yes, sorry about that. My camera cut out right as I was going. Okay. Our next speaker is Felicitas Beier, who works as a junior researcher at Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. In Potsdam, she works in the Land Use and Resilience Group with the Global Land Use Modeling Framework, MAGPIE, and is enrolled as a doctoral student in agricultural economics at Humboldt University in Berlin. So yeah, Felicitas, take it away.
Thank you. I am going to share my screen. Hold on a second. Oh, starts at the last slide. That's not good. So here we are. Do you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for inviting me to today's event and to share my experience about my research visit in the US that was facilitated by GLASSNET. I actually went to Purdue University in West Lafayette exactly a year ago. So today I'm just talking about how this all came about and how junior researchers like myself can profit from GLASSNET. And then I will reflect a bit on the role of short-term research stays for early career scientists. So I am a PhD student at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. It's a research institute close to Berlin in Germany. And I work in the land use and resilience group. We model land use and land use change dynamics in the future using the two models LPJML and MAGPIE. LPJ is a global crop and vegetation model, and MAGPIE is a global economic land use model. And in my PhD project, I'm basically developing a hydroeconomic model that basically bridges these two models. So PIC is already a great working environment for working on interdisciplinary topics. So I actually hardly ever traveled for the first few years of my PhD. For one, because I was very busy learning how to use LPGML data, how to run MAGPIE, how to develop my own model. And then also because COVID hit, right, in my PhD time. But then right after COVID, actually, Tom Hartley came to visit us at PIC, and he stayed for about a year and was telling us about their model, Simple. And it is in a way quite similar to MAGPIE, but there are also some differences, and that's what I got interested in. I wanted to understand Simple a bit better. Also because, I mean, I knew about Simple and the gridded version Simple G before because I had read all of the publications when I was writing my PhD project proposal. So it was really great to get to know Tom and get some firsthand information about the model. And he was also the one who told me about GLASSNET and the opportunity to get funding for traveling for early career researchers. And that's basically how the idea got incepted into my head. For me, the next steps that followed to make this possible were to establish contacts to the rest of the working group, to see whether there are interests that we have in common. And I mean, yeah, water is a common interest, and like this whole global, local, and bridging of scales is something that both models have to solve. So after having established the contacts, two of the researchers from US actually came to visit us at PIC. And I think I was in a way also lucky that PIC itself is already involved in quite some networks, which I won't talk about in detail now. The point that I'm trying to make is that because we are already integrated quite a lot in the international modeling community, researchers like Iman and Danielle had an interest to visit PIC. And so I got lucky that Danielle actually visited the EasyMap workshop in the following year and then passed by PIC, and Iman went to a GTAP conference and then also visited PIC afterwards. So I got to connect to them personally already before I myself traveled. Yeah, and then by autumn of the same year, actually, my time to travel came, and I went to Purdue University in West Lafayette for 2 weeks. And it started off by me presenting my work in their group meeting, and then afterwards I arranged one-to-one meetings with like several, if not all, members of the group and discussed like lots of my ideas in more detail with the members of the group. And I also worked on like two main research outcomes during this day. So one was that we managed to plug in results from my model in Simple G and also got to play around a little bit with it. And the other was that I started deriving some estimates for a transformation elasticity, which was like an idea that I had to make my model results also work in other modeling contexts. Yeah, like the whole like modeling part was actually just one part of it. The other one was like making new connections. And like one, of course, was Tom's team directly. But then also I got to know members from the GTAB team, which was actually unplanned, but still very helpful or valuable for me. Because right now I got involved in a project where they are also involved. So it's somehow, I don't know, it somehow helps like if you already have some familiar faces in like these modeling calls. And yeah, so in general, I have to say the people at Purdue were very, very welcoming, and I had a really great time and basically came home like enriched with like many new ideas. And yeah, I actually combined like my research and my visit at Purdue with attending a meeting, a GLASSNET meeting in Minneapolis. So first of all, after the 2 intense working weeks at Purdue, I took some vacation to travel around US and see a bit of the country while I'm already there. And then basically ended up in Minneapolis, where the annual GLASSNET meeting was taking place. And that was also very interesting for me, for one, because again, I got to make new connections and also met some old acquaintances again. And also content-wise, there was a lot of like interesting topics for me, because a lot of the discussions actually evolved around research software development, which is a topic that I'm very interested in. But then there were also discussions about like potential research collaborations, and also like of like what the future of GLASSNET might look like. And I remember, for example, that there were discussions not only about financing short-term research stays like mine, but also like longer-term fellowships, or what I found also a nice idea was to facilitate like summer schools where like members of the GLASSNET network basically learn how to run each other's models, which I think is something that would be very interesting for many early career scientists. So now I would like to take some time to reflect my visit in how far did I profit from this experience. This is something that I think for many of us early career researchers is important to do, because many of us like question the necessity to fly around the world for conferences or short meetings, or at least this is the case in my bubble of people working on topics of climate change. And we are also a generation of early career scientists whose experience in science was basically shaped by the COVID pandemic, where a lot of meetings were shifted to remote, and we are very used to Zoom. And then I believe that sometimes like, I don't know, like I believe this is a good working mode and it can replace many in-person meetings. And then the question is like, when is it really worth to travel? And I definitely did not take the decision to fly over the Atlantic lightly, and I had very high expectations for making it worth it from like a carbon cost benefit perspective. And yeah, I don't know. This put a lot of pressure, of course, on it, but then like it's also good to reflect on like in how far these exchanges are useful. And like these are the things that I came up with. One is making new contacts. So by combining the research stay at Purdue University with the GLASSNET meeting in Minnesota, I made much more contacts and strengthened connections than in any scenario where I would have only done one of the two. So I think I would definitely recommend this to like always combine like conferences, but with visits, or like just like bundle the opportunities that you have. From many of the connections that I made, I actually profit quite immediately because, as I said, like having members of the international modeling community that I got to know, they're showing up at conferences that I go to, or that are then involved in our model intercomparison projects, helps us as young researchers because, or at least I am less shy to talk in a call when I already know some people. And I think in that sense, it like is profitable to have met them in person. About the long-term effect of like connections, I cannot really say much because it just had been a year ago. But I would assume that I may also profit from this, like from establishing contacts now already, even though like right now I'm involved like in projects and like I know very clearly what I'm working on. But then at one point, once I defended my PhD, it might come the point that I have to write project proposals. And then I think it's really helpful to have connections and have like ideas that you can like write your projects on, the proposals, I mean, yeah. Yeah, then regarding the work output, I have to say I was very happy with the output we produced in just 2 weeks. It was quite amazing. And I would say it was 2 very productive weeks. And I came home like more self-confident and also enriched with ideas. The main problem in my particular case was that I also already had a plan for my following PhD papers, and that was agreed upon with my supervisors, and I had project responsibilities. So when I then came home, I couldn't actually continue working on the new ideas. And I think this is something that I don't know how to do it differently, but like this is something I would try to improve if I would repeat this. Because at least I underestimated a little bit what can be done as a side project, and that in the end, like it's always better if you have funding and like your ideas fit into a project that you anyway have to do. Then in terms of learning, I would say the research days was definitely helpful. I gained a new perspective on my own work. Up until then, I mainly focused on understanding MagPi and our modeling context. But in the end, I think it's very important to understand other models as well, to know what can be done differently. And it's important when you think about improving your own model, but also when you're part of model intercomparison projects, or if you want to review manuscripts and all these kinds of scenarios. So in that sense, it was very helpful for me already this research day, but I could also imagine that this kind of summer school type idea would be even like, or would also be very helpful in like learning other models. Yeah, one other advantage I have to say, like by now I also went to some conferences, and what I like by visiting a research group and presenting the work there is that like you get far more feedback. Like people really focus on your presentation, and like in conferences where you have like 10 minutes to speak, 5 minutes Q&A, sometimes like there's not really time to reflect about the work actually. And then like being able to schedule one-on-one meetings and clarify certain things was also like very helpful. And I could imagine, I don't know, like also for people who don't like to present so much to a broad audience, it may be helpful to visit other research groups. Yeah, and then lastly, just also getting, for me at least, this was very nice as well to get to know a different country, like on a personal level, but also to understand the local context better. And so in my opinion, if it's possible, I think I would always recommend to add a vacation when you are traveling somewhere far, just to like see even a bit more. So yeah, I guess my 2 recommendations are if possible, always try to combine trips. It increases the likelihood that you profit from any of the parts, and it increases the connections that you make. And maybe have a plan on how to continue working on the ideas that you develop during the trip. Yeah, so that is my story. I hope it was helpful for you, and I hope that we have a good discussion later on.
Thank you, Felicitas. Yeah, that was wonderful. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. HyeJin Kim, who is a senior scenario developer at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and an inter and transdisciplinary researcher with training in social, natural, and policy sciences. HyeJin has been working with intergovernmental, government research, civil society, and private donor agencies in improving the use of scenario-based information and integrative evidence in informing decision processes. So yeah, Dr. Kim, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Libby. I hope you can see my slides.
Yeah, we're seeing them in presenter view right now.
So this should. Did it do it? Oh yeah, it's not. Yeah, I'm not really sure how you actually.
Yeah, I think it'd be okay, maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe try
it's
to
probably
use slideshow on the top.
slideshow on the top.
No, when you
Maybe I try this slideshow and then. Yeah, this is not gonna work.
Yeah, otherwise I think if you maybe don't go into the view slideshow and just leave it, yeah, on this screen, we can still see the slides very well.
It's still presenters, right?
use slideshow on the top. That's okay. Yeah.
Slideshow on the top. Where is it? Sorry.
You were there, so you show. Yeah, here, click it, and on the top, right hand side, use slideshow. Very end. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does
There
the
we go.
nice.
Good. Sorry, sorry about that. Yeah, so hello, my name is HyeJin Kim, and I'm a scenario developer at UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. Thanks for inviting me to this workshop. It's slightly different from what I'm used to, where you present your work or projects. So I will combine a little bit of my journey to where I am today, and then I hope that the sharing of the project details will also motivate some of you to venture on a road that not so many people seem to take onward. So I am a South Korean who studied sociology and anthropology and international development in the US, and also practiced in the international development in research and future, scenarios, projections, and so on for financial and resource planning for some time. And after working in Korea with government agencies and foundations for some time, I've gone back to study biology and in respect of biodiversity conservation in Germany. But most recently, I have been in the UK working on the nexus issues, so kind of understanding the role of biodiversity, the impact relations with other sectors, and also kind of trying to understand in relation to the economic development, how do we actually achieve conservation and transformative economy better together. And most recently also, I've been working with Korea in the context of ecological peace through science. And here's where I actually really brought science policy, society interfaces together in making some impactful science together with citizens and government agencies together. So I'll speak briefly also on this project, which actually is quite exciting. So given my background in international development, I was already familiar with Millennium Development Goals, which then was superseded with Sustainable Development Goals. And when I started my PhD in biodiversity conservation, my PhD project was focused on developing nature and people-centric scenarios framework called Nature Features Framework. And in parallel, I was working on model intercomparison on biodiversity and ecosystem services with a broad range of modeling communities. So then I was kind of thrown into this research arena where I had to look at different tools, different scenarios that were developed, as well as different scientific and analytical frameworks that's been developed over time. At the same time, I was also involved in the Global Earth Observation Biodiversity Earth Observation Network, GEOBON, which my PhD advisor was chairing. And here the concept was to standardize and better monitor biodiversity and ecosystem services, especially across the globe, by implementing this essential variables framework, similarly to how climate community has these variables, essential variables. So with these data frameworks and scenarios framework and modeling tools, and again, the introduction to this systems of environmental economic accounting, UNCEA, which also try to better account for natural capital in the national accounting system, linking and collaborating with Earth observation agencies, kind of brought many different frameworks and agencies into context. Then with these global goals that's promoting, conservation more integratively and holistically through this conventional biological diversity in some interaction with Sustainable Development Goals to improve nature and societal well-being. I was constantly thinking in my PhD how to better make sense of all of these frameworks and agencies and institutions and networks that's trying to promote something in common, but have different roles, but sometimes with confusion of who is doing what. So I tried to cross some of these frameworks together, and I consciously also try to use them more integratively in my research, so that whatever is produced, for instance, from the scenarios and modeling, it's able to inform some of these global policy frameworks, as well as the national policy frameworks. So engaging with these networks, I think may be a little bit overwhelming and confusing at times, but trying to make a little bit more coherent sense of what they're doing and synergizing by crossing their complementary roles, I think could also be a valuable contribution that we can make as early career researchers or frontierers. I continue engaging with global networks such as World Biodiversity Forum to keep up to date with scientific advancements that's being made in biodiversity modeling and so on. And also try to engage with networks that seem to require some of the knowledge and experiences that I have from biodiversity science in better, improving and also better implementing some of the scenarios work that they also seem to need expert input from the biodiversity science and others. And I've been also engaging with national platforms to ensure that the science that we try to produce, co-produce, is also being delivered to the ground and with citizens where it's needed. So with youth groups, with citizen groups, that's trying to understand what is happening in the sustainability science space or biodiversity conservation. They actually are engaging with scientists and also various initiatives that's currently ongoing. So some of what we envision is actually being implemented and also taken forward by the catalysts in these platforms. So I'm going to briefly speak to you about this DMZ Open Festival in Korea that is bringing science, policy, and society interface together in raising the awareness about the ecological, cultural, historical, and societal values of nature better in the division between the two Koreas. So it was quite by a coincidence and also opportunistic coincidences that led to this collaboration. And so I presented my PhD at a seminar in Korea at a university, and then was invited to this platform called DMZ Open Festival, where they wanted to vision the future of the Korean Peninsula using nature people-centric framework. And the festival is hosted by the Peace Cooperation Division of the Republic of Korea in Gyeonggi Province. So they have this vision of progressing towards legalizing conservation policies in the DMZ area through the promotion of ecological peace and DMZ's global commons. And I took it as an opportunity, given the very interesting platform that they bring citizens together with government agencies and research agencies together in co-production of visions through the means of art, sports, music, science, and other means. So I developed a new project called Korean Nature Futures, funded by the National Capability for Global Challenge at UKCH, funded by UKRI, where we try to co-develop place-specific nature people-centric scenarios for the Korean Peninsula by visioning the future together, developing the narratives and modeling framework, integrating innovations and scientific advancements with a broad range of stakeholders for ecological, economic, and societal transformation. It's a very broad level, high course level futures project that tries to provide some scientific evidence for the forum's policy and visions going forward through scenarios and modeling project. So we have this platform where we have 3 years of forum with visioning as a part. And we did the visioning of the futures last year, which we are now taking on visioning of the pathways, which will be followed by the visioning of the policy workshop. We'll try to explore different options for the future in achieving these future visions. And the project is actually covering various other methods that can be employed in futuring. So one is obviously like trying to understand what the development trajectory has been for Korea in social, ecological, and economic domains. So we understand how things are different in Korea and how that might be reflected in the future. And then also kind of using the systems dynamics mapping approach of the today, of the present, as well as the future visions. So we know how the dynamics and also complexity around the problems and also ambitions can be transformed over time. And this is also then complemented by more especially explicit biophysical and atmospheric feedbacks modeling. So we have this land use, biodiversity, climate, and society models kind of interacting and feeding each other together to inform how our decisions for nature positive futures will impact nature, society, and climate in return. So just to give you a little bit of more closer view on how we are going about doing this is we have a range of collaborators that's been frontiering different aspects of scenarios and modeling, and we were very fortunate to bring some of these colleagues on board. So what we are doing is slightly different from how the environmental modeling has been done conventionally. So we are considering very explicitly from the beginning how the state of nature, so biodiversity, ecosystem functioning and services, should be accounted for when we try to reflect these nature positive future visions of Korea into 2050, the future. So we use these biodiversity related data sets as the beginning point of input to the land use and cover models, and then try to contrast, for instance, reflect how urban dispersal will happen across the country into like eco-villages or ecological corridor may be built between the two countries, and then accounting for the future climate change that is already happening in Korea as constraining environment and also thresholds. So this new ways of land use projections will then fit into land surface model, biodiversity model, INVEST model, ecosystem services, and Earth systems model, and CAR-CLM5 in trying to broaden up the range of outputs that we assess for societal climate and also biodiversity impact of how these visions will mean for these domains in a full feedback cycle. So in this project, we tried to bring some scientific innovations as well as linking of these models that maybe at the moment very coarse at the high level, but hopefully provide some new information on how these new ways of land projections and futuring may mean for Korean society in 2050. We do have lead developers of these models and data engaged centrally, but also all of these colleagues are also with early career researchers who actually implement various aspects of this modeling framework. So it's an opportunistic space where we have willing frontierers co-creating new paradigm of projecting the future with quantitative models. So having gone through some of the disciplinary crossing and also linking networks to make sense for myself, I learned that following curiosity is really important, and also searching meaning in science that you're in and connecting dots where it's critically needed. Being open to new disciplines, innovating through inter and transdisciplinary spaces where you may find more support and also like-minded colleagues, it seems really important. And finding and collaborating with frontierers, keeping up to date with scientific advancements also makes it an even more exciting journey. Enjoying conversation with non-scientists to learn what we all do differently, and also finding mutual interests also lends you at interesting opportunities to engage with society for impact, and also bringing science into non-scientific realms. And finally, being thoughtful, genuine, inclusive, and brave in what you do, sometimes speaking up for and then also acting on the transformation that's required in society, as well as in science, I think makes you go a far way. So in summary, I think I'm learning after 20 years of endeavoring that science can be an exciting and fun and meaningful place to be. And I also hope that you will find your journey through exciting spaces going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. To start off the Q&A session, there's a quick question from Tom in the chat. So Tom, do you want to unmute yourself maybe quickly and ask?
HyeJin, very interesting stuff. I love this new project on the Korean Peninsula. That's very exciting. You know, it strikes me that there's so much going on in the biodiversity area. I wonder, how do you keep on track, on top of it all, and how do you decide where to make your contribution? That seems like a challenge we all face, but especially someone getting going in their career. Thanks.
For me, I think attending, for instance, the World Biodiversity Forum is useful because they bring centrally broad range of biodiversity scientists and communities together to share on the newest advancements. So I do try to go to Biodiversity Forum as much as I can. And also the IPES network is a great place to engage, since they do synthesize biodiversity, sustainability science with biodiversity as a focal topic. So engaging in some ways, whether it be through assessments or some functional network such as scenarios and models, or some indicators development, I think that also helps you stay engaged. Similarly with GeoBond network that tries to optimize observation and other heterogeneous monitoring data to better improve monitoring of biodiversity. in support of CBD type of high level decision making. And I forget your and I think I try also to engage with networks that's outside of biodiversity, that's leading biodiversity, or your respective domain of expertise, because that's also where I think we can improve science a little bit better to be connected rather than going in silos. Yeah, and I forget the second question, but
No, that's a great answer, HyeJin. Thank you. Very helpful. Hey, Marisa, you put a ton of stuff in the chat. Any kind of an overview there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it depends on how much you want to dig in or not. I'd say there's a PDF, there's a link to a PDF of the Team Science Field Guide, which is very easy to read. I'll also try to see if I can quickly find a link. There's a +1 article, I believe it is. Maybe it's another one that someone wrote, which is called 10 Ways to Ruin a Collaboration. And it's kind of tongue in cheek, but it has a lot of really good reminders, right, about what not to do. And the Team Science Field Guide sort of is, gives you some idea of, what should you do, right? How do you handle conflict? How do you think about these things? A lot of it may read like common sense, but there's a lot of common sense things as human beings we don't do every day, right? So it's a good reminder to just read through and think about, pick one thing. How can you apply that every day? How can you apply it in the situations that you're in when you're working with other people, or even just being aware of when you see other people doing it? That's, a good place to start. There's lots of online trainings. There's lots of things like that. You could think about even doing a simple project management online training. I know there's one on Coursera. I think Google runs one. My colleague Hannah Love runs one that's also focused on team science, just to kind of get your feet wet and think about, applying that. And then there's obviously many, many books on team science. And if you're interested and you get down that rabbit hole, please feel free to reach out and I can suggest some other things to look at. Another thing I would suggest is if you're on LinkedIn, to follow, there's a couple groups to follow. I'd follow Harvard Business Review and Teamradery, which just have some really short articles about, some very simple things about working with others that can kind of help you. Not all of it is specific to, right, in the research settings that we're in, but there are a lot of lessons that you can apply and have takeaways from.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of the panelists. Officially, I think we are at 10 o'clock. But if there are any other questions, let's see, does anybody have any final questions? Otherwise, maybe we will adjourn.
Hey, Libby, Holly just posted a link for those who missed something or want to backtrack on this. Hopefully we can add these in the chat stuff that was so useful also, Holly. Make that available. Well, thank you, Libby and Carly, for organizing this, and the speakers were terrific. I learned a lot. So keep tabs on the GLASSNET mailing list for the next event.